Claire Donnelly never thought much about the sirens. To most people in her small Midwestern city, the tall gray poles scattered across neighborhoods were just background scenery. They sat there like oversized lampposts, waiting for tornado season, or the occasional civil defense drill. Her job was to make sure they actually worked when needed. It wasn't glamorous. She wasn't a scientist or a soldier, just a contracted technician for the emergency management department. That morning was supposed to be like all the others. She had her laptop slung across her shoulder, her orange safety vest zipped up, tight against the cool spring breeze, and a clipboard tucked under her arm with a day's schedule. She had 3 sites to check, each involving little more than plugging into the system, running a test tone, and logging the results. By noon, she expected to be back in her office, sipping reheated coffee while filling out paperwork. But fate never warns you when a routine day is about to split into something extraordinary. The first siren site was near a playground. Children's laughter drifted from swings as she unlocked the panel at the base of the tall pole. Parents sat on benches, scrolling their phones, not sparing a glance at her. Claire plugged her laptop into the maintenance port, the screen flickering. Alive with lines of diagnostic code, everything looked normal. "All right, let's give you a little voice," she muttered, half to herself, half to the machine. She tapped a command. The speaker above her hummed, then let out the usual low frequency rumble as if clearing its throat. Normally, it would then blast the standard alert tone, that long, hair-raising wail everyone in town recognized from tornado drills. But instead, the speaker sputtered, static hissing through the air. Claire frowned. She glanced at her screen, ready to rerun the command. Then it happened. The static sharpened into a voice. Not the automated female testing tone she'd heard hundreds of times before, but something deeper, metallic, almost human. "Welcome back, Shadow Commander." The words froze her in place. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Slowly, she looked up at the siren head looming above her. The sound wasn't a glitch of garbled audio. It was precise, intentional, and directed at her. "What the hell?" she whispered. The playground chatter behind her faded into background noise. Her heart thumped in her ears. She quickly typed in a shutdown command, silencing the siren. The voice cut off mid-breath, leaving behind only an eerie ringing in her head. She yanked her laptop cable free, hands trembling. Her mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe someone hacked the system. Maybe her laptop picked up interference. But no, she knew this equipment too well. The siren's voice recognition system wasn't designed for whatever that was. And Shadow Commander? That wasn't a phrase you just stumble across. By accident. Claire packed up in a rush, glancing nervously at the parents nearby. They didn't seem to have noticed anything unusual. No one was staring at her. No one seemed alarmed. Only she had heard it. Back in her truck, she sat gripping the steering wheel, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her face was pale, her dark hair clinging to her forehead with nervous sweat. "Welcome back," the phrase looped in her head. How could the system welcome her? She wasn't anybody special. She was just Claire Donnelly, 32 years old, with a decent job and a quiet life. A technician, not a commander. Shaking her head, she forced herself to laugh. "It's nothing," she muttered aloud. "Just a bug. Just a messed up recording." But even as she said it, she didn't believe it. When she returned to the emergency management office, her supervisor, Dennis Hargrove, was hunched over his desk as usual. A heavy-set man with thinning hair, Dennis had been with the department longer than anyone, his walls cluttered with faded certificates and disaster drill posters. "Back early?" he grunted as she walked in. "How's the first site?" Claire hesitated. Should she tell him? If it really was a software glitch, he needed to know, but something inside her resisted. The words felt too strange to repeat. Still, she forced them out. The siren talked. Dennis raised an eyebrow. Talked? Yeah, not like the usual tone. It said something. He leaned back in his chair, smirking. Probably just some garbage data left over in the firmware. What did it say? Her throat tightened. She didn't want to say it aloud. It would sound crazy. But Dennis was waiting. Welcome back. Something like that. He chuckled, shaking his head. That's just a glitch, Donnelly. These systems are ancient. Half of them still have Cold War code buried somewhere in the guts. Ignore it. Run the next tests and log the results. She forced a smile, nodding. Right, just a glitch. But she knew glitches didn't sound that deliberate. That night, she sat at her kitchen table long after the sun dipped below the horizon, her laptop glowing in the dim room. The hum of her refrigerator was the only sound. Her curiosity gnawed at her. Dennis might shrug it off, but she couldn't. She reconnected her laptop, opening the cached logs from the test. She scrolled through lines of code and data, eyes scanning. For anomalies. There it was, an entry time-stamped at the exact second the voice had spoken. A string of text that didn't belong. Voice authorized. Commander ID match initiation sequence. Echo Storm protocols ready, her chest tightened. These weren't error messages. This was intentional. Echo Storm? She whispered, tasting the words like poison. The files were old. She could tell from the formatting, decades-old code buried beneath layers of updates. It shouldn't have even been active. And yet, it had recognized her voice. Out of all possible variables, it had identified her. Claire leaned back, staring. At the ceiling, Commander ID match. Her rational mind screamed at her to stop. Close the laptop. Forget it. Pretend it never happened. But another part of her, the part that needed answers, couldn't let go. Who had written this code? Why was it hidden in a public safety system? And why, of all people, did it think she was some kind of commander? Sleep didn't come easy. That night, every creak of her apartment sounded amplified. Every flicker of shadows seemed like eyes watching. When she finally drifted into restless dreams, they were filled with fragments she couldn't explain. Children in uniforms, a long hallway of steel doors, voices whispering commands she didn't understand. And through it all, one phrase, echoed, relentless and haunting. Welcome back, Shadow Commander. Claire arrived at work the next morning with heavy eyes and a headache. She had barely slept, haunted by the voice that seemed to seep into her dreams. She tried convincing herself it was nothing, a system quirk, a corrupted line of old firmware, but her thoughts kept circling back to the phrase, welcome back, Shadow Commander. The more she thought about it, the less it felt like a random artifact. Computers didn't invent words, especially not words so pointed, so precise. Dennis was already at his desk when she walked in, coffee mug in hand, glasses, perched low on his nose as he scanned a maintenance report. He didn't even glance up. Second sight's yours today, he said flatly, sliding the clipboard toward her. Let's keep on schedule. We've got the quarterly report due, and the mayor's breathing down my neck. Claire hesitated. About yesterday, Dennis waved a hand dismissively. Don't overthink it, Donnelly. You're new enough that you haven't seen all the quirks these systems throw at you. I once had a siren blast snippets of a baseball game through it, because the radio receiver was bleeding interference. Technology's messy. File your logs and move on. He wasn't going to listen. She could tell from his tone. He wanted efficiency, not questions. Claire nodded, taking the clipboard. Sure, just a glitch. Her lips said it, but her gut screamed otherwise. The second test site was on the edge of town, near the river. The siren tower rose like a sentinel over empty parking lots the morning sun glinting off its metal frame. Claire parked her truck and climbed out, her laptop bag heavy at her side. The air was crisp, and the only sounds were the distant rush of water and the occasional chirp of birds. Too quiet, she thought. She unlocked the base panel, plugged in, and launched the diagnostic interface. Lines of code filled her screen. She hesitated before entering the test command, her fingers hovering. What if it happened again? Her rational mind whispered, "You need proof." If she could record it, she wouldn't. Sound crazy. Maybe then Dennis would take her seriously. Asterisk, she opened the laptop's audio recorder, hit the test command, and waited. The siren rumbled. Static crackled. Then came the words. Phase 1 complete. Awaiting confirmation, Shadow Commander. Her heart jumped. She stared at the laptop, watching the waveform pulse as the words were captured. It wasn't her imagination. It was real. Claire yanked the cable free and stumbled back, nearly tripping over the curb. The siren tower loomed above her, silent once more. She sat in her truck, replaying the recording again and again. Each time. The voice was clear, male, metallic, precise. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't random. It was communication. But with who? Back at her apartment that night, she hunched over her kitchen table with the laptop open. She replayed the recording, headphones pressed to her ears, searching for nuances in the voice. It wasn't natural. There were no breaths, no stumbles. The cadence was military, clipped and efficient. She dove into the logs again, scrolling past thousands of lines until she found another buried string of text. Protocol initiated. Echo Storm Commander ID, verified phase 1. Test sequence active, her pulse quickened. This wasn't just old code, buried in the system. This was a program, deliberate, designed, still functional after decades. And somehow, it thought she was the one meant to run it. Claire Googled Echo Storm Protocol late into the night, but found nothing. No public records, no declassified projects. It was as though the phrase didn't exist. Frustrated, she leaned back, rubbing her temples. Maybe it was classified. Maybe buried in some military archive. Then a thought struck her. Her father. He had been career Air Force, though he never spoke much about what he did. Classified assignments, late nights, sudden transfers. He died when she was 14, and her mother never explained the details. What if this connected to him? A memory surfaced. Being 6 years old, sitting in a sterile government facility playroom with other children. Men in uniforms. Watched through glass as she and the others played games that weren't really games. Repeating phrases, responding to tones. Her father's voice outside the glass. She's adapting well. Her chest tightened. Had she imagined that memory? Or had she simply forgotten it until now? The following day, she tried to act normal. She smiled at Dennis, filed her reports, and avoided mentioning the recording. She needed more evidence before she brought it to anyone. But as she left the office, she noticed something unsettling. A black SUV parked across the street. Its windows were tinted, engine running. At first, she thought nothing of it. But when she returned home hours later, another black SUV, or maybe the same one, was idling near her building. Her stomach dropped. Coincidence? Or was someone watching her? She closed her blinds that night, double-locked her door, and sat in the dark with her laptop open. She played the recording again, and this time she thought she heard something faint beneath the words. A barely audible echo, like another voice layered under the primary one. She ran it through her audio software, boosting the lower frequencies. The hidden voice emerged, distorted but clear enough to chill her blood. Commander acknowledged, standing by. She froze. Whoever was on the other end, they weren't just broadcasting. They were responding. She slammed the laptop shut, heart hammering. This wasn't a glitch. This was a conversation, and somehow she had just stepped into the middle of it. The next morning, Claire stood at her bathroom sink, staring into the mirror. Her eyes looked sunken, ringed with fatigue. "Who the hell are you?" she whispered to her reflection. She didn't feel like a commander. She didn't feel like anyone important at all. Yet the system had chosen her voice, her identity, to reawaken something long buried. And if someone out there was responding, it meant she wasn't alone. Her phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "Stop digging or you won't wake up tomorrow." Her breath caught. The phone slipped from her hand, clattering against the sink. Whoever was behind this, they already knew she was looking. And they weren't going to let her walk away. Claire parked her truck beneath the looming shadow of the third Siren tower. It was late evening now, the last streaks of sunlight bleeding across the horizon, staining the clouds in crimson. Normally, she preferred to finish her rounds by noon, but she had deliberately delayed this one. Something inside her whispered that if the Sirens were alive, truly alive in some hidden way, then maybe night would bring answers daylight concealed. The neighborhood around the tower was deserted. A few porch lights flicked on here and there, but most windows were dark. She took out her laptop, plugged into the base of the tower, and hesitated. She could feel her own pulse thrumming in her fingertips. "What am I doing?" she muttered under her breath. She should have filed her report, ignored the anomaly, and moved on, like Dennis told her. Instead, she was standing alone in the dark, practically begging for whatever was behind those messages to reveal itself. But her curiosity was too strong. She launched the diagnostic interface. The system came online, hums and clicks echoing. In the metal casing above her, she typed the command, holding her breath. The Siren gave a low static hiss, then spoke. "Commander verification confirmed. Proceed to Phase 2. Claire's heart skipped. The voice was louder this time, more confident, as though her repeated interactions were strengthening its connection. She fumbled for her audio recorder, hitting capture. Then something new happened. The Siren didn't just speak. It listened. From the speaker came a faint pattern of clicks, followed by another voice. This one weaker, layered beneath the main broadcast. "Commander acknowledged. Standing by for orders." Claire staggered back. Someone or something had answered. The air around her felt charged, as though the whole tower were an antenna pulling her into a forgotten world. "No," she whispered. "This isn't possible." But the voice repeated, "Standing by." The hair on the back of her neck rose. She scrambled back into her truck, slamming the door shut and locking it. Her laptop screen still glowed with live logs from the system, lines of text pouring in faster than she could process. Command channel open echo storm. Phase 2 active awaiting. Command input. The words blurred. She shut the laptop with a snap, heart racing. That's when she saw them. Headlights. A black SUV sat at the far end of the street, its engine idling, lights on but no movement inside. Claire's chest tightened. It was the same vehicle she had seen near her apartment. They were following her. She quickly turned her key, the truck's engine roaring to life. The SUV didn't move. She pulled out anyway, forcing herself not to glance in the mirror until she was a block away. When she finally looked, the SUV was gone. Had it even been there at all? Or was paranoia twisting her vision? That night, Claire couldn't shake the voices. She sat cross-legged on her bed, headphones clamped over her ears, replaying the recording she'd captured. The words were unmistakable. Commander acknowledged. Standing by. Each time she listened, she caught new undertones, faint echoes, subtle beeps between the words. It wasn't random. It was coded. Her mind drifted back to that memory again. the childhood games in sterile government rooms, the commands she was told to repeat like nursery rhymes. Maybe those weren't drills at all. Maybe they had been conditioning. She pulled her knees to her chest, whispering to herself. No, 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 that's insane. Her phone buzzed. She flinched, nearly dropping it. Another text from the same unknown number. Stop. Do not activate. You don't understand. Claire's fingers trembled. She typed back before she could stop herself. Who are you? What is Echo Storm? 3 dots appeared, the sign of someone typing. Then, nothing. The dots vanished. The conversation ended. She stared at the blank screen, dread tightening her chest. Whoever they were, they knew exactly what she had found, and they didn't want her going further. The next day, Claire tried to distract herself with normalcy. She worked, filed reports, even forced a laugh at one of Dennis's dry jokes. But, underneath it all, she was unraveling. Every time she passed a siren tower, she felt like it was watching her, waiting for her voice to unlock something monstrous. By evening, her resistance broke. She drove to the edge of town, where another tower stood near an empty industrial lot. She couldn't resist anymore. This time, she didn't even plug in her laptop. She stood at the base, looked up, and spoke directly into the cold metal structure. This is Claire Donnelly. Who are you? For a long moment, only static replied. Then the voice. Shadow Commander. Identity confirmed. Awaiting directive. Claire's throat tightened. I'm not your commander, she said firmly, her voice shaking. Static hissed. Then came the faint reply, chilling in its obedience. Orders denied. Awaiting correction. Her stomach twisted. Whoever or whatever she was talking to, it wasn't programmed to accept refusal. It believed she was its superior. She backed away slowly, heart racing, until her phone buzzed again. Another text. This one shorter, sharper, angrier. Stop now, or we will stop you. Her hands shook as she stuffed the phone into her pocket. The siren tower loomed silently above her, but she could still feel its voice echoing in her bones. That night, Claire barely slept. When she did, her dreams were strange and vivid. She saw rows of people standing in dark rooms, their faces blank, their bodies stiff like mannequins. A voice crackled overhead. Awaiting orders, Commander. She walked among them, shouting that she wasn't their leader, but none of them listened. They stood frozen, eyes fixed on her as if waiting for the single word that would bring them to life. When she awoke, sweat drenched her sheets. For the first time, she was truly afraid. By the end of the week, Claire realized something terrifying. The broadcasts weren't just repeating themselves anymore. They were evolving. Each time she connected, the system became more responsive, more aware. The phrases grew more complex, as though whoever was on the other end had been waiting for years for her return. Commander, signal strength restored. Next sequence ready. Commander, units dormant, standing by. And worst of all, Commander, we missed you. Each word left her feeling more hollow, more uncertain of who she really was. The idea that her entire childhood, her family, her memories might be a cover story pressed on her like a weight she couldn't escape. What if she really was the Shadow Commander? What if her whole life had been a lie? On a rainy Friday evening, Claire sat in her truck outside another tower, laptop open, debating whether to run one more test. The screen flashed unexpectedly. Logs filling on their own. She hadn't typed anything. Her laptop speakers crackled. Commander, the metallic voice said. It is time. Her pulse spiked. Time for what? She whispered. The reply was instant. Phase 2 initiation. Awaiting your command. Her throat went dry. She couldn't breathe. And then, in the distance, she saw it again. A black SUV, parked across the lot. Its headlights burned through the rain, aimed directly at her. This time, it didn't vanish. It started rolling slowly toward her truck. The SUV rolled closer through the rain, its headlights slashing through the storm. Claire's breath caught. As she gripped the steering wheel of her truck, she could feel the vibration of the approaching engine through the wet pavement, each second stretching into eternity. Her instincts screamed at her. Run. She jammed her key into the ignition, her truck sputtering to life. Tires screeched against the slick asphalt as she sped away, windshield wipers thrashing. In her rearview mirror, the SUV lingered for a moment. Before following, her pulse skyrocketed. She swerved down side streets, through puddles and narrow alleys, praying her pursuer would lose sight of her. After several tense minutes, she cut her lights and turned sharply into a darkened industrial. Park. The SUV thundered past, headlights sweeping over her hiding place, but not stopping. She waited, motionless, until the hum of its engine faded into the distance. When silence returned, Claire collapsed forward against the steering wheel, chest heaving. This was no longer paranoia. They were real. They were watching, and they wanted to make sure she didn't go further. But fear didn't smother her. It ignited something else, defiance. If they were so desperate to keep her out of the truth, then she had to find it. At home, dripping wet, Claire booted her laptop and connected to the Siren logs again. She wasn't going to let threats stop her. She was done pretending this was just a glitch. The encrypted files she had glimpsed before flickered at her from the system logs. The folder name Echo Storm glowed like a wound she couldn't stop. Touching, she traced its subdirectories, her heart pounding with every click. Most were scrambled with military-grade encryption, unreadable without keys she didn't have. But one folder, Archives, seemed less protected, as if someone had deliberately left a crack in the armor. She opened it. Dozens of text documents filled the screen, each labeled with strings of numbers, dates stretching back to the late 1960s. Her hands trembled as she opened the first file. Project Echo Storm initiated. March 3, 1962, objective. Covert communication through public emergency infrastructure. Method: integration of subliminal command codes into civil defense systems. Phase 1: recruitment and conditioning of commanders. Phase 2: activation of embedded sleeper operatives. Claire's mouth went dry. The words sprawled across the screen in cold, bureaucratic detachment. It wasn't conspiracy theories scribbled on internet forums. This was official, real. She scrolled. Further, commanders, specially conditioned individuals trained from early childhood. Each commander identity linked to biometric voiceprint, capable of activating latent operatives with spoken command sequences. Her blood chilled. Biometric voiceprint. The system had matched her voice. She clicked another file. This one from the 1980s. Subject 17. Female. Age 6. Demonstrates high response rate to conditioning drills. Retains memory suppression effectively. Candidate for Midwest Siren Network. Designation: Shadow Commander. Claire's vision blurred. She reread the words again and again, but they refused to rearrange into anything less horrifying. Female. Age 6, Midwest. Shadow Commander. It couldn't be coincidence. It was her. Her memories, the playrooms, the drills, her father's voice, they weren't fragments of imagination. They were real. She had been trained. No. She whispered, pressing her hand over her mouth. Tears stung her eyes. No, 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 her father. He must have known. Maybe he had been part of it. Maybe his assignments, the secrecy, the endless postings, all of it had been tied to Echo Storm. And her mother's silence after his death wasn't grief alone. It was complicity. Her entire childhood was built on a lie. Claire stumbled from the table, pacing her apartment. Her breathing quickened, hands clawing at her hair. They made me into this. They built me. The walls seemed to close in. She wanted to scream, but her voice stuck in her throat. Instead, she forced herself back to the laptop. She had to know more. Another file. Deployment. Nationwide. Commanders. Placed regionally, disguised through civilian integration. Activation protocol dormant until authorized. Potential triggers. Foreign invasion, government collapse, or classified contingencies. Her mind reeled. Sleeper operatives hidden across America, waiting for someone like her to speak the right words and bring them to life. But there was something worse. Another note, buried at the end. Commanders may not retain memory of conditioning. If compromised, system will still recognize biometric identifiers. Commanders will be drawn instinctively toward reactivation. Her stomach turned. It explained everything. The dreams, the flashes of memory, the irresistible pull toward the sirens. She wasn't stumbling into Echo Storm by accident. She was returning to it. Her phone buzzed, jolting her back. Another text. You opened the files. This is your final warning. Her breath hitched. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Before she could respond, another message came. They will kill you before they let you remember everything. Her pulse raced. She stared at the glowing screen, torn between terror and fury. Someone out there knew exactly what she was uncovering. And if they were right, her life was hanging by a thread. But she wasn't about to stop now. For days, Claire lived in a haze of obsession. She went through the motions at work, nodding at Dennis, filing paperwork. But the moment she was alone, she buried herself in the Echo Storm archives. The deeper she dug, the darker it grew. She found records of psychological conditioning techniques. Flashing lights, tones buried in siren tests. Repetitive commands designed to rewrite memory. She read transcripts of training sessions with children who sounded disturbingly like herself, their voices parroting back phrases without hesitation. Q, what do you do when the voice calls? Hey, we listen. We obey. Q, who is the commander? Hey, the commander is the one we wait for. She shivered. The words weren't just instructions. They were worship. Whoever these operatives were, they weren't just soldiers. They were programmed zealots, ready to awaken at her voice. One night, she opened a folder marked black files. These were more heavily encrypted, requiring hours of brute force attempts to access. When she finally cracked one, her stomach dropped. It wasn't just documents. It was surveillance. Old photos filled the screen, grainy but recognizable. Children at playgrounds, schoolyards, homes, and in several of them, unmistakably her. Claire at age 7, holding her mother's hand. Claire at age 10, riding her bike down the block. Claire at 12, walking home from school. All of them taken from a distance. All of them tagged with her project designation, Shadow Commander. Her hands shook so violently, she nearly dropped the laptop. They had watched her entire life. The weight of it crushed her. Every laugh, every childhood birthday, every memory of innocence was laced with the knowledge that she had never been free. She had been monitored, shaped, molded into a weapon she hadn't even known she carried inside. The question clawed at her mind. Why now? Why me? Why, after decades of silence, had Echo Storm begun whispering again? And what, exactly, was Phase 2? That night, unable to sit still, Claire drove back to the first siren she had tested. The playground was empty now, swings creaking in the wind. The tower loomed above her, silent but menacing. She stared up at it, fury bubbling inside her. What "Do you want from me?" she shouted. Her voice echoed across the empty park. The speaker crackled. Static hissed. "Welcome back, Shadow Commander. Awaiting orders." Claire's fists clenched. "I don't want your orders. I'm not your commander." But the reply came, calm and unwavering. Identity confirmed. "You cannot refuse what you are." Her legs weakened. She stumbled back, staring at the metal giant. The words reverberated in her chest. "You cannot refuse what you are." At that moment, Claire realized the truth. She could run. She could hide. She could pretend it wasn't real. But Echo Storm wasn't going to let her go. It was in her blood, in her voice, in the memories buried deep in her skull. No matter how hard she resisted, the system would keep calling her back. And sooner or later, she would have to answer. The morning after her confrontation with the siren, Claire sat on the edge of her bed, staring blankly at her hands. They trembled no matter how tightly she pressed them together. Her apartment was silent, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It felt like someone else was in the room with her, breathing just out of earshot. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, the siren's voice returned. Identity confirmed. Awaiting orders. Her throat still ached from shouting against the wind, as though she'd been fighting not just with a machine, but with something buried deep inside herself. And now, she couldn't shake the feeling she wasn't alone anymore. She tried to distract herself. She made coffee, turned on the TV, scrolled through her phone. But everywhere she looked, patterns emerged. On the morning news, a helicopter hovered behind the anchor's shoulder. It lingered oddly long in the shot. At the gas station across the street, a sedan had been parked since before dawn, its driver pretending to read a newspaper. Even her phone buzzed strangely. Texts from unknown numbers filled her inbox. Random strings of letters and numbers, like scrambled codes. She deleted them, but they kept coming. The watchers weren't invisible anymore. They wanted her to know she was being watched. By afternoon, she drove to work, gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles whitened. Every mirror reflected headlights that seemed too steady, too deliberate. At the emergency management office, Dennis greeted her with his usual crooked smile. "Rough night?" he asked, chuckling. Claire forced a nod, trying to hide her trembling. She wanted to confide in him, but her instincts screamed to keep quiet. If Echo Storm was as old and entrenched as the files suggested, how could she be? Sure Dennis wasn't part of it? Still, he noticed her unease. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she swallowed. Something like that. That day's assignment was another siren test in a nearby county. Dennis offered to drive, but Claire refused. The thought of being trapped in a car with someone, anyone, made her skin crawl. She drove alone, her eyes flicking constantly to the mirrors. The sedan from the gas station reappeared, 2 cars back. She tested it with turns, detours, sudden exits. Each time it followed, careful but persistent. Her chest tightened. By the time she reached the siren tower, she was sweating through her shirt. The test went smoothly, too smoothly. The speaker warned, the tones echoed, but there was no glitch, no voice. Still, the hairs on the back of her neck prickled. She climbed back into her truck. Across the street, the sedan idled, engine humming softly. The driver never moved, never looked at her directly. But she could feel the weight of his attention. She snapped a photo with her phone, zooming in on the plate. When she checked it moments later, the image was corrupted, static, blurred, as though the data itself had been scrambled. Her hands went cold. She drove home in silence, but the sedan stayed behind her the entire way. That night, Claire barricaded her apartment door with a chair. She closed the blinds, unplugged her TV, and set her phone in the freezer to silence its constant coded buzzing. Still, the watchers found her. Through the blinds, she saw shadows move across the parking lot. Not one figure, but several. Men, in dark clothing, too tall and stiff to be neighbors. She pressed her back against the wall, pulse hammering. Her father's voice whispered in memory, "If you feel the watchers near, don't freeze. Move. Act before they do." Before she realized what she was doing, she grabbed her backpack, shoved her laptop inside, and slipped out through the fire escape. The city at night swallowed her, neon lights flickering over wet asphalt. She ducked into alleys, kept low, took random turns. Still, her gut told her the watchers were close. At one intersection, she glanced over her shoulder and froze. 3 men stood across the street, half hidden by shadow. They weren't chasing her, not yet. They simply waited, watching, their stillness more terrifying than any pursuit. Her breath fogged in the air. One of them raised a phone to his ear. That was enough. She bolted. Claire ran for blocks, her lungs burning, legs trembling. She ducked into an all-night diner, collapsing into a booth, trying to appear casual. The waitress poured her coffee without asking, glancing at her pale face. "You okay, honey?" Claire nodded weakly, though her eyes darted to the window. Cars crawled by outside, but none stopped. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe she had shaken them. She sipped the coffee, forcing her breathing to steady. Then the diner door chimed. 2 men walked in. Not the ones from the street, but dressed the same. Plain suits, empty eyes. Their gazes swept the room and fixed on her. Her stomach dropped. She fled out the back door before they could speak. By dawn, Claire found herself at the edge of the city, crouched beneath a rusted rail bridge. She hadn't gone home. She hadn't stopped moving. The watchers had pushed her into the margins, where shadows clung and trains howled in the distance. Her laptop weighed heavy in her bag. She knew she had to keep digging, but doing it here, exposed, was suicide. She needed help. But who could? She trust? Her mother. The thought hit her like lightning. If her father had been part of Echo Storm, her mother had to know more than she ever admitted. The lies, the silence. It wasn't just grief. It was protection. Maybe her mother had answers, or maybe she had more secrets. Either way, Claire couldn't run blind anymore. She stole a used car off a quiet street, hot-wiring it with trembling hands, surprised at how natural the motion felt. Training she never remembered learning flowed through her, precise and efficient. The realization sickened her, but it worked. She drove north, out of the city, toward her childhood home. The road stretched endlessly, dawn painting the sky with bruised colors. She checked her mirrors constantly. For the first time in days, no cars followed. Still, the paranoia clung to her skin. At one rest stop, she thought she saw a figure standing on the hill, motionless, facing her. When she blinked, it was gone. Were the watchers really there? Or had Echo Storm's conditioning fractured her mind so deeply she could no longer tell? By evening, she reached her hometown. The streets felt smaller, quieter, as though the town itself had shrunk since her childhood. But every corner, every cracked sidewalk, carried memories now poisoned with doubt. Her mother's house sat at the edge of town, the paint peeling, the porch sagging. Lights glowed faintly inside. Claire parked a block away, her hands shaking on the wheel. She hadn't seen her mother in months. They'd grown distant since her father's death, Claire burying herself in work, her mother retreating into silence. But now, there was no avoiding it. She needed the truth. As she approached the porch, her foot hesitated on the first step. Through the window, she glimpsed her mother in the kitchen, moving slowly, making tea. The familiarity of the image nearly broke her, but her heart hammered with suspicion. What if her mother was one of them? What if she had been all along? Claire knocked anyway. The door creaked open. Her mother's eyes widened with shock, then softened with something unreadable. Guilt, maybe. "Claire," she whispered. "I was afraid this day would come." The words sliced through Claire like a blade. "You knew," she whispered back, her voice trembling. "You knew all of it." Her mother's lips quivered. "Come inside, quickly. They'll be here soon." The watchers weren't shadows anymore. They were closing in. And Claire was running out of time. The kitchen smelled like chamomile and dust. Claire sat at the table, her backpack still slung across her shoulders, as if she might need to bolt at any second. Her mother moved slowly, deliberately, setting 2 mugs on the worn wooden table. She hadn't asked if Claire wanted tea. She'd simply poured it, as though she had been waiting for this moment all along. The silence between them was heavy. Claire's heart pounded so loudly, she feared her mother could hear it. Finally, Claire broke the quiet. "You knew," she said. Her voice cracked, more accusation than question. "You knew about Dad, about Echo Storm, about me." Her mother's hand trembled as she set the teapot down. "I hoped it would never reach you." Claire's stomach turned. "It already has." Her mother sat across from her, eyes lined with years of grief and something else. Shame. "Claire, your father wasn't just a soldier. He was part of something old, something buried beneath everything you think you know about. This country." Claire leaned forward. "The Shadow Commander." Her mother flinched at the words. Her lips tightened, as if even saying the title summoned ghosts. "Yes," she whispered. "That was his name, his identity." Claire's throat closed. "So it's real?" Her mother nodded. "Real enough to destroy everything we built. As a family." The truth came in fragments. Her mother's words tumbled out like stones dislodged from a crumbling wall. Echo Storm, she explained, was not an agency, not in the way Claire imagined. It was older even than the Department of Defense. A project born in the shadows of the Cold War, a network of sleeper operatives trained not just to fight wars, but to survive after them, to rebuild control in the chaos that would follow nuclear fire. Her father had been one of their finest, recruited young, conditioned, reshaped, made into a living contingency plan. The Shadow Commander was not a rank. It was a role, passed from one generation of operatives to the next. Claire felt the room tilt. Why him? Why us? Her mother's eyes glistened. Because he said yes, and because he thought he could protect us from what it required. Claire gripped her mug so tightly, she feared it would shatter. And me? Why did that siren know me? Why did it call me back? Her mother's expression hardened. Because you were part of it too. The words struck like lightning. No, Claire said, shaking her head violently. No, I was a kid. I don't remember anything. You don't remember, her mother said softly. Because they made you forget. Claire's vision blurred. The room felt too small, the walls closing in. Her mother's voice cracked as she continued. Your father never wanted it for you. But Echo Storm doesn't ask permission. They prepare successors, children, if necessary. The conditioning began when you were 6. The puzzles, the memory drills, the games you thought were just training exercises with your dad. Claire's breath hitched. Memories clawed at the back of her skull, puzzles on rainy afternoons, her father timing her with a stopwatch, the strange code words he made her repeat before bed. She had laughed at it then, thinking it a silly game. But the laughter died in her throat now. Oh my God, she whispered. It wasn't a game. Her mother's hands trembled as she reached across the table. He tried to undo it. He tried to bury it. That's why he left. Not because he stopped loving us, but because he thought his distance would keep you free. Claire pulled back, her chair scraping against the floor. Free? I'm not free. They're watching me, following me. They've already pulled me back in. I didn't even know, and it's still happening. Tears welled in her mother's eyes. Because they've been waiting, Claire. Waiting for the Shadow Commander's heir to awaken. The phrase made Claire's skin crawl. Her mother wiped at her face, her voice breaking. I wanted to tell you. 1,000 times I wanted to, but they were always there. I knew if I said too much, if I drew attention, they'd take you. They already have, Claire whispered. For the first time, anger cracked through her fear. All this time, you let me walk blind into it. You let me think I was crazy, that I was imagining the Watchers, when you knew the truth. Her mother's face crumpled. I thought ignorance was safer than knowledge. God forgive me. I was wrong. The room went silent again, broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Claire pressed her palms into the table, grounding herself. She needed answers, not apologies. Tell me everything, she demanded. No more secrets. No more lies. If I'm part of this, I need to know what I'm up against. Her mother hesitated, then nodded. Very well. But you must promise me something. Claire narrowed her eyes. What? Her mother's gaze was sharp, unwavering. Promise me you won't go looking for them. Promise me you won't try to finish what your father started. That path, it doesn't end with victory, Claire. It ends with erasure. They'll use you, and when you've served your purpose, they'll erase. You too, Claire wanted to promise. She wanted to swear she'd burn every file, smash every speaker, and walk away. But deep in her chest, something stirred, something old, something planted in her long ago. The voice of the siren echoed in her memory. Welcome back, Shadow Commander. A chill coursed through her veins. I can't promise that, she said. At last, her mother's face paled, but she nodded as though she had expected this. Then you must know what you carry. Her mother rose from the table and disappeared into the hallway. Claire sat frozen, torn between fury and dread. When her mother returned, she carried a small metal box, dented and scratched with age. She set it on the table and pushed it toward Claire. This was your father's. He left it with me the night he vanished. He told me never to open it, not until you came back asking questions. Claire's hands shook as she unlatched the box. Inside lay a collection of objects. A faded photograph of her father in uniform, but not any uniform she recognized. His eyes were harder, colder, a stranger's. A deck of flashcards covered in strange symbols, half familiar from her childhood. Drills, a metal badge etched with a storm cloud and a lightning bolt. And beneath it all, a cassette tape labeled in her father's handwriting, for Claire. Her chest tightened. Her mother whispered, he knew this day would come. Claire lifted the tape, her fingers tracing the ink of her father's handwriting. 1,000 questions swirled. What had he left her? Instructions? A confession? A farewell? Her mother's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. If you listen to that tape, there's no turning back. Claire met her gaze. There's no turning back already. The house creaked as the wind shifted outside. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The world felt suddenly fragile, as though reality itself was holding its breath. Claire slid the tape back into the box and closed the lid. Not yet. She needed a player, a place safe enough to hear it without interference. For now, the weight of it was enough. She rose from the table. They know I'm here. We have to move. Her mother shook her head. No, Claire, you have to move. They won't come for me, not yet, but you, every second you stay, you put us both in danger. Claire's chest ached. I can't. Just leave you. You must. Her mother's voice cracked, but her resolve held. Run, Claire. Run until you're ready to stop running. And when you are, listen to the tape. Claire wanted to argue, to scream, to collapse into her mother's arms and forget all of it. But the headlights that cut across the living room window silenced her. A car had pulled up outside, the watchers. Her mother's eyes widened. Go. Now. Claire grabbed the box, slung her backpack over her shoulder, and kissed her mother's cheek. I'll come back for you. Her mother's lips trembled, but she nodded. I know. Claire slipped out the back door, vanishing into the night as the front door rattled with heavy knocks. As she sprinted into the darkness, the box thumping. Against her side, one thought repeated in her mind like a drumbeat. The answers are in the tape. But so were the chains. And she wasn't sure which would break her first. The cassette tape sat heavy in her palm, its faded label trembling with every breath she took. She had run half the night, cutting through back roads and wooded paths until her lungs burned. But the headlights never returned. By dawn, she found herself in an abandoned ranger station, deep in the state forest, the kind of place where no one came anymore. The windows were boarded. The air smelled of mildew and pine, perfect for hiding. Claire dug through dusty cabinets until she found what she needed. A battered tape player, half buried beneath yellowing maps. She wiped the dust off with her sleeve, shoved in fresh batteries from her backpack, and slid the cassette into the slot. For a moment, she hesitated. Her hands hovered above the buttons. What if the tape wasn't answers at all? What if it was? Just another lock, another mechanism to pull her deeper into the machinery of Echo Storm? But the weight of her mother's words pressed down on her. He knew this day would come. Claire pressed play. The tape word, static filling the silence. Then a voice, her father's voice. Claire, he said, low and steady. If you are hearing this, then they've reached for you. And it means I've failed. The sound of him nearly broke her. She clutched the player with both hands, closing her eyes, as though his presence might materialize in the room. I wanted you free, the voice continued. I wanted you to have a life outside the shadows. But Echo Storm does not let go. Not of me. Not of you. Not of anyone chosen. Claire's stomach tightened. He had known. He had always known. They will tell you you're a weapon, that you're an heir, that you are the next Shadow Commander. His voice hardened. But listen to me, Claire. You are not their commander. You are their undoing. Claire's eyes snapped open. Undoing? The tape hissed, and then her father spoke again. You've been prepared, not just to lead them, but to destroy them. Every drill, every puzzle, every code I gave you as a child, they were not for obedience. They were for resistance. Buried within their conditioning are escape hatches. Keys they don't know you carry, if you can remember them. Her breath hitched. The puzzles, the flashcards, the whispered code words. Before bed, she thought they were drills for her obedience. But what if they were safeguards instead? Seeds of rebellion planted by her father, under the noses of Echo Storm itself. The voice softened. Claire, they'll try to make you doubt. They'll say you belong to them. But your mind is your fortress. Use the phrases I gave you. When the moment comes, they'll open doors they never meant for you to open. Claire's hand shook as she scribbled notes in the margin of an old ranger log. Phrases? Doors? She tried to recall the strange things her father once made her repeat. Storms break, but shadows remain. The commander is never seen. Only lightning strikes twice. Her heart raced. They were like nonsense poems to her as a child, but now they thrummed with hidden meaning. The tape clicked softly as her father's voice dropped to a whisper. They'll come for you, Claire. They'll send the watchers first. If you see the man with the scar across his left cheek, run. Don't fight. Run. Claire's blood froze. She had seen him. Weeks ago, in the library parking lot, a man standing, too still, watching her from across the street. She remembered the scar. Her father's voice steadied. When you can't run anymore, when they corner you, you'll have one last chance. Go to the place where the river bends around stone. You'll know it when you see it. There's a cache buried there, a map, a device, and the truth about Project Halcyon. Claire mouthed the words. Project Halcyon? The name tasted alien, but it burned with significance. The tape hissed again. Above all else, Claire, her father said, voice breaking. Trust no one who claims to be an ally. Not the government. Not Echo Storm. Not even me, if you ever see me again. They can wear my face. They can wear anyone's face. But they can't wear your memory. A long pause. Then softly, I love you. More than they'll ever understand. Remember the storm, Claire. Remember me. The tape clicked to silence. Claire sat frozen. Tears streaked her face, but her mind was a storm of calculations. Undo them. Phrases as keys. Project Halcyon. A cache by the river bend. And the scarred man, the watcher she had already glimpsed. Her father had left her more than answers. He had left her a mission. And in that moment, something shifted. Inside her, the fear that had haunted her for weeks began to calcify into resolve. They wanted the Shadow Commander reborn, but they might just get something far worse. His daughter awakened. She was shoving the tape into her backpack when she heard it, the crunch of boots outside. Claire froze, every nerve in her body on fire. The ranger station had been silent for hours, but now, voices. Low, hushed, male. She darted to the boarded window and peered through a crack. 3 men stood near the tree line. Black jackets, earpieces. One of them turned his head just enough for the light to catch the scar across his cheek. Claire's stomach plummeted. The man from the tape. Her father's warning rang in her ears. Don't fight. Run. Claire yanked on her backpack, grabbed the box, and bolted out the back door. The forest swallowed her, branches clawing at her arms as she sprinted downhill. Shouts erupted behind her. Heavy boots pounding. Visual on the target. Claire's lungs burned as she tore through underbrush. She stumbled, caught herself, pushed harder. She had to lose them. She reached a ravine where a fallen tree formed a crude bridge across the stream below. She darted across, nearly slipping. On the slick bark, behind her, the men crashed through the woods with mechanical precision. One of them raised a weapon. A red dot danced across her shoulder. Claire dove off the log, hitting the icy water below. The shock stole her breath, but she let the current drag her, tumbling downstream, limbs thrashing against rocks. Above, shouts echoed. They had lost sight of her. For now, Claire dragged herself onto the bank half a mile downstream, coughing up river water. Every muscle screamed, but her father's words burned in her skull. The place where the river bends around. Stone. She looked up, and there it was. The river curved sharply around a massive outcropping of granite, half covered in moss. The bend. Her chest heaved. Her father hadn't just given her a riddle. He had given her a map. Claire crawled toward the stone. The ground was soft, freshly. Disturbed. She clawed at the earth with shaking hands until her fingers struck metal. A box, bigger than the one her mother gave her, heavier. She dragged it out, wiping mud from its surface. On the lid was the same insignia as the badge inside. The first box, a storm cloud and a lightning bolt. Her pulse thundered as she pried it open. Inside lay a folded map marked with red ink. A sleek black device that looked like a cross between a radio and a detonator, and a stack of documents stamped with the words, Project Halcyon Classified. Thunder rumbled overhead, though the sky was still clear. Claire's heart pounded in rhythm. Her father's voice echoed again in her mind. You are not their commander. You are their undoing. She closed the box, clutching it to her chest as rain began to fall. The watchers would regroup. They would track her. They would never stop. But now, for the first time, she had more than fear. She had a direction, a weapon, a purpose. The storm had found her, and she was ready to strike back. The rain fell harder now, hammering the forest floor like war drums. Claire clutched the metal cache against her chest as if it were a lifeline. The river roared behind her, swollen by the storm. Ahead, the granite outcropping loomed like a sentinel, its jagged surface glowing faintly whenever lightning slashed the sky. She staggered beneath the stone's overhang, forcing her trembling hands to open the box again. The map, the strange. Black device, the classified documents. Her father's secrets, her inheritance. Her eyes scanned the cover sheet. Project Halcyon, Level Omega. Clearance subject. Cognitive Command Network, CCN. Objective. Integration of human operators into Global Defense Siren Array via subliminal auditory resonance. Claire blinked hard. Words blurred together, but one phrase anchored itself in her mind. Global Defense Siren Array, the siren speakers. The very system she had been testing when the voice welcomed her as Shadow Commander. She skimmed further, the documents shaking in her hands. Project Halcyon wasn't just a surveillance system. It wasn't even just Echo Storm's tool. It was bigger. A network of sirens wired across the country, across the world, capable of transmitting frequencies that could bypass conscious thought, embedding commands directly into the human mind. Not just sound, control. Her stomach twisted. This was why the commander mattered. Not to lead soldiers in the traditional sense, but to speak through the sirens, their voice imprinted with unique cognitive signatures. A chosen individual whose commands could bind entire populations without their awareness. The Shadow Commander wasn't just a title. It was a crown, a throne built on obedience. Her father had been one, and now they wanted her. A branch snapped. In the woods, Claire's head jerked up. Through the curtain of rain, figures moved, black jackets, weapons raised. The watchers, they'd tracked her. She shoved the documents back into the box, but kept the black device in her hand. It had a trigger, a switch, a dial she didn't yet understand. Maybe a weapon, maybe a key. She didn't have time to find out. A voice boomed through the storm. Claire Monroe, stand down. You've been chosen. The scarred man stepped into view, his pale face slick with rain, his eyes cold as glass. His weapon was trained directly on her. Chosen for what? She shouted back, her voice cracking with both fear and defiance. He didn't blink. To finish what your father began. To command the storm. Claire's grip tightened on the device. He didn't want me to command. He wanted me to end. This. The scarred man's lips curved in something between a sneer and a smirk. You misunderstand. He was Echo Storm. He built Halcyon. Every phrase he whispered to you, every puzzle, every bedtime code, they weren't safeguards. They were activations. You were groomed, not protected. Her chest constricted. Lies or truth? Her father's voice on the tape, you are their undoing, collided with the watcher's words. Come with us. The man pressed, his tone almost reverent now. Speak through the array. End war, end chaos. One command, and entire nations. We'll kneel. You don't destroy this power, Claire. You inherit it. For a heartbeat, she faltered. The storm seemed to hold its breath. To inherit the voice was to hold dominion over millions. To stop violence before it began. To end threats before they formed. Wasn't that worth something? But then her father's warning cut through the temptation. Not even me, if you ever see me again. They can wear my face. They can wear anyone's face. Control was never peace. It was a prison dressed in silence. Her jaw set. No. She flicked the switch on the device. A piercing frequency ripped through the air, higher than thunder, sharper than lightning. The watchers staggered, hands clamped over their ears, weapons dropping into the mud. Even the scarred man faltered, his confident sneer collapsing into a grimace of pain. The device vibrated violently in Claire's hand, a faint green light pulsing in rhythm with the sirens she remembered from the base. It wasn't just a disruptor. It was a transmitter. Her voice could ride the signal. Claire's mind spun back to the phrases her father taught her. Keys, he called them. Keys to unlock, keys to resist. She pressed the trigger and spoke into the storm. Storms break, but shadows remain. The green light flared. The watchers dropped to their knees. Not dead, but paralyzed, their movements. Jerky and broken, as though invisible chains had wrapped around them. Claire's breath caught. It worked. The codes weren't activations for obedience. They were commands for resistance, to jam the system, to fracture its hold. Her father hadn't lied. He had harmed her. The scarred man fought against the invisible grip, veins bulging in his neck. His voice came out strangled, forced. You can't stop what's coming. Claire stepped forward, rain plastering her hair to her face. She looked down at him, at all of them, bound by her father's legacy and her own choice. Maybe not, she said, but I can end you. She turned the dial on the device. The light shifted from green to red. The watchers screamed as the frequency surged. Static rolled through the trees, echoing across the storm, until one by one their voices were silenced. Bodies collapsed into the mud, motionless. Only the scarred man still twitched, gasping. Claire knelt beside him. Tell me about Project Halcyon. Tell me who runs it. He coughed blood, lips curling into a final bitter smile. Project Halcyon is the United States. His eyes glazed. His chest went still. Claire recoiled as though struck. The United States? Her father hadn't just been working for a shadow cabal. He had been serving the very government that now hunted her. The storm above cracked open with a blinding strike of lightning, as if the sky itself split under the weight of the truth. Claire staggered back, staring at the device. She could feel it humming, ready to connect, ready to broadcast her voice through the Siren network. One phrase, one command, and every speaker across the nation, maybe the world, would carry it. She could end Echo Storm, or she could claim the mantle of shadow. Commander. Her father's whisper returned to her. You are their undoing, but undoing didn't just mean destruction. Undoing could also mean rewriting. Her pulse thundered. What would she say? She raised the device to her lips. The storm's roar faded, as if the world itself leaned in to listen. People of this country, she said, her voice trembling, then strengthening as the words carried through the static. You've been living under echoes, under shadows, under control you never knew was there, but you are free. From this moment on, you are free. She twisted the dial to its highest setting and spoke the last phrase her father had ever taught. Her, only lightning strikes twice. The device screamed, discharging a wave that rattled her bones. The green light flickered violently, then shattered in a burst of sparks. The box in her hand split open, fried circuits spilling smoke, and across the horizon, Claire swore she heard it, the silence of millions waking from a dream they hadn't known they were in. The rain eased. The storm moved on. Claire dropped to her knees, chest heaving, the broken remains of the device smoldering beside her. The watchers lay still in the mud, The cache lay open, its secrets spilled into the earth. She was alone again, but not powerless Dot, because for the first time, she wasn't just her father's daughter, or Echo Storm's weapon, or the Shadow Commander's heir. She was Claire Monroe, and she had chosen. Her father had planted seeds of rebellion. She had watered them with defiance, and now they had bloomed into something new. The storm had ended, but the echoes, the ones she chose, had only just begun.